This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:53 is the time. Let's go straight to our next guest, Ralph Schoellhammer. He's a political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna. Very good morning to you.
Good to talk to you, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well. As usual, I've yapped on far too much. We've talked about loads of other things and we're getting too late, so let's get straight to it. Let's talk about Germany. Franz Merz, the new Chancellor, has basically had the asylum policy struck down by a Berlin court, saying you can't just turn away people on the border as he started doing, even though it's been massively successful. But he said he's going to carry on. Do you think he's going to get away with carrying on?
No, I don't think so. And it's time for the legislative to really jump into action. It's the same problem they have in Britain. It's the same problem in France and other countries. Over the last 60 years, we have created a legal framework that makes it more or less impossible now for many countries to control the flow of migration. The reason for this is because these frameworks were developed in a completely different world from the one we live in now. And there's an unwillingness, I think mostly driven also by very activist NGOs, to be honest, to adapt these frameworks to the reality we live in. And unless this is happening, you pretty much only have two choices. You can ignore the law, which I think is not a good precedent, or you can follow the law and do something that for good reasons your own people will not like very much. Yeah. So the third option, the best option, would be to change and adapt the law, but there seems to be a lack of willingness to do this.
Yeah, well, indeed, it's difficult to do. It's the same problems that we have in the UK, where basically the law is being made up as they go along by judges rather than dictated by Parliament.
Yeah, and I think one simply has to admit that it's very, very odd when this one British politician, forgive me for not remembering his name, was saying that criticizing...
Keir Starmer? No.
No, I remember him.
He's very forgettable.
Yes. But I forgot that criticizing the European Convention on Human Rights is akin to what the Nazis did. I mean, this is always the go-to point, right?
Yes.
Everything is like the Nazis, everything the Nazis did. I mean, I just read today in the Telegraph a new study by my good friend Matt Goodwin. Yeah. Right? According to the study, in 40 years, white British people will be a minority in their own country. That is not good. When did the people vote for that? I mean, that's a very serious question. They never voted for this. And the fact that we treat this as if it is completely normal is absurd. If I would show you a number that says Saudi Arabia will be majority Christian in 40 years, your question would be, why is that? What happened? What did the Saudis do? How could that take place? And in Britain, we say, well, this is then these weird BBC documentaries where they say, well, somehow Britain has always been a nation of colored people. Yes. No, it hasn't. Right? Nobody's more pale than the people of Britain. I mean this is a compliment. Right? So this is just bad. And by the way, it's not racist to say this. I'm a multiculturalist, and I think that every culture at some point should have their own country, but I don't think that all of them should live in Europe or the United Kingdom. And I believe that most of the British people and European people would agree with me on that.
Yeah, I mean, I very much think that British culture should be not just the dominant, but the only culture in Britain. I'm quite old-fashioned. I'm very relaxed about the colour of people's skin, but nevertheless, it is an indicator of change that wasn't agreed to or voted for. What do you make of also what's going on in the Dutch government? I know you keep abreast of politics across Europe. I mean, Geert Wilders, regarded as far right, hard right, whatever term people want to use, he's sort of triggered an asylum protest that's brought down the Dutch government. Can you explain very briefly what's happened there?
Well, in a nutshell, Geert Wilders made a huge strategic mistake, and this was he pretty much sacrificed the possibility to become prime minister himself to get his party into government. And in that government, in this coalition government, right, the other parties were more or less constraining his party from doing what the people expected it to do. This is now a kind of break glass in case of emergency situation for Wilders, because his party is losing popularity in the polls.
Because if we're electing you, it's because we want you to actually get the job done. And that's the risk of going into any coalition and actually being in power and not being able to do anything.
Yes, but there's another factor that's going to become more prevalent, I think, over this year and the next couple of years. And I'm an example for this myself, because I admit I have been slightly radicalized over the last few months myself, which is that originally the argument was we need to curb the inflow of migration and then do assimilation and integration. I more or less came to the conclusion, I believe this is no longer enough. Whatever term you want to use, whatever word you want to, we can have a semantic conversation about this, but remigration is going to become an issue. There needs
Deportation, you mean?
Well, deportation, for me, that sounds a little bit like forced. I mean, I'll give you an example. I got my PhD in the United States, and when I got my visa, I had to sign a piece of paper that said, once you're done with your PhD, you have to leave the country. Yeah. You can come back as a tourist, right? But you cannot immediately stay and live here. And this is what I did, right? I still love the United States. I was an immigrant, and then I had to remigrate because these were the stipulations. Exactly, those were the terms. And I think this is the same thing we have to do in Europe. You flee, for example, from Assad in Syria because you're an Islamist, and now you have the Islamists in charge, so you can go back. Right? This idea that the European Court of Human Rights has now defined that poverty in your home country is an asylum, is a cause for asylum. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's madness.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Again, you know, there's a good few billion people who could claim that, and I'm not sure we've got room for everybody. Ralph Schoellhammer didn't get time to talk about net zero, but I'm sure you're, as a sane figure on that, delighted at the idea that we're probably going to be dropping targets for getting these unusable, very expensive, useless heat pumps into people's homes. Ralph Schoellhammer, thank you very much indeed for that.